This video is going to cover Excel Day 2 packet, which should be in your OneNote under the Excel tab. You're going to see it looks a little similar to Excel Day 1, but it should say across the top, Excel Day 2 Formulas. So the first couple things that we're going to go through in here are just some odds and ends that we didn't cover in the first video. So the first one is under formatting data. We did cover this a little bit in that first video. But, for example, there were a couple things that we did not cover, such as, I'm going to go under more number formats here. There are ones for date, lots of different formats for how your date can get put in. There are formats for time. There is scientific notation, which will allow you to have a certain number of decimals showing. There is one just for text, which will treat numbers just like words, so that it does no formatting whatsoever. There's even custom and special. So there are lots of different ones that you can put in, like for a phone number, social security number. Whenever you're putting numbers in, they should have some sort of format. So if you need to go in and change that format manually, always make sure that you do that so that you don't end up with errors in your spreadsheet later because Excel is treating the numbers in the wrong way. So I'm going to hit cancel to get out of that because we don't need to change any formatting just yet. And then let's scroll down to the next page in the packet. So also in your spreadsheet here, you can add borders to your spreadsheet. If you are split screening like I am, if you go under font, you click the little arrow under font, you'll see this box right here where you can click a drop down and you've got lots of different border options. These are going to be the same border options that you have in Microsoft Word. So you need to highlight the area of cells that you want to edit, that you want to give a border to, and then you can go in and add a border. So for example, if I were to highlight these cells here, and then go in and choose, maybe I want just the outside borders, I can click off of it and see now there is an outside box. Maybe I want only, or maybe I want the inside border as well. It will do all of them. It is up to you when you're making your spreadsheets. Unless you're explicitly told to, you can decide for yourself whether or not you want to add borders. Some people like to add the borders when they're looking at it because it makes it easier to see. Especially when you go to print, it's good to have the borders because the light gray lines, the grid lines on here, don't print when you just print a regular worksheet. So if you want the borders to show up, make sure you turn those on. Since we're doing all of our work digitally for this class, it's up to you whether or not you want to turn the borders on, mostly for your own preference. You can also shade the different cells in your spreadsheet. You can do that in that same drop-down. There is a paint bucket box. When you do that, you can pick any color, and as you see as I'm hovering over colors, it's changing the color of that box. So if you have just one cell selected, it will fill in that one cell. If you have multiple cells selected, it will change all of the cells. So if I highlighted a whole box, and I go to here, I can highlight an entire section and change the color for the entire section. Hit undo. All right, moving on to the last little bit that we did not get to in the first video. Inserting columns and inserting rows. Sometimes once you are halfway done with a spreadsheet, you may realize you need to add a column in between two other columns or add a row in between two other rows. And to do that, you are going to I'm going to click into a cell here. So if I want to add one in between A and B, I'm going to highlight A, and then I'm going to right click. There's an option there for insert, and when I do that, it is going to add an extra cell. And you can do the same, or not extra cell, an extra whole column. You can do the same for adding a row. You right click and do insert, and you will get an extra row. Now to get into some of the formula stuff. First thing we're going to talk about is sorting data. So before we talk about sorting data, let's type this information in columns A and B and duplicate this little table that we see. All right, once all of my data is typed in, you're going to see it's typed in there. In our first video, I showed you how to expand a column or a row to automatically fit whatever data was in those cells. So we're going to do that here by putting our cursor in between columns A and B and double clicking, and now we can see the full names and nothing is cut off. So sorting data will help you alphabetize, it'll help you organize, it helps you take the data that you're given and make it more manageable and make more sense to you. So the first thing that we need to do is we are going to look for the sort button. So to do that, we are going to go under Data. So under Data, you have these sort and filter options. There's lots of different ones that are there for you automatically. So the first thing that we are going to do is we are going to sort it. So we're going to click Sort. You're going to notice it automatically selects the information for us. It's guessing that student and test scores are our headers. Those are the titles of our columns, which it's correct. And then our data is below it. So we have lots of options here. We are going to do sort by. So the first thing we wanted to do is we wanted to sort by the test scores. So if we sort by test scores, it's going to sort on values. You see there's a couple different options. We want to leave it on values. That means it's going to sort these by number. And for the order, we can do smallest to largest, largest to smallest, or custom list. We'll leave it as, we're going to change it to largest to smallest. And then we'll click OK. So when we do that, our data should shift with Marty Jacobson being at the top, Joe Henderson at the bottom, and the numbers falling correctly in between. Let's move on to the next page of the packet. What you can also do, though, before we move on, is if we go back to sort, if we say maybe we want to change it, we want to switch to student, we're going to sort it A to Z. It would then alphabetize it. Click OK. Then it goes Betty Archer first, then down to Jamie Zanderbilt. So however it makes sense for you and the data that you're using, you can sort your information. You can also add multiple levels of sorting. So if I wanted to sort it first by student and then by test scores, it would first sort it alphabetically and then it would sort it based on the number. So for us, it's not going to make much of a difference, but that could be a big factor if you have a large table with lots and lots of data. So I'm going to leave that there and then make a new sheet where we are going to start working on some formulas with addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. So on this page here, there is some inputting you need to do. So the first thing that we need to do is I want you to copy this section down here. So price of meal, price with tip, and these numbers. Once you have that in, let's make these columns a little bit bigger so everything fits. And then let's do a little sample first here over on the side. So you see here there's 5 and 2. Let's just type a 5 and a 2 in that we can play with for just a minute. So when we are putting in formulas, formulas are just basically math equations. So when we want Excel to do the math for us of the numbers that are in our table, we're going to put in some sort of formula. All formulas always start with an equal sign. So once you start with an equal sign, up here it's going to guess what function you might be trying to do. Right now it's guessing that you want to do a sum, which is going to be addition. That may or may not be correct. So what you can do is you can use cell references to add these two together. So instead of just relying on Excel to guess what you want to do, let's just explicitly tell it what we want it to do. So if we want it to add these two cells together, we are going to list out E3. It'll highlight it for us. We want to add it to cell F3. So we will do plus sign F3. It'll color code it, and then as soon as we hit enter, it will give us our number. So there's a number in G3, but when we look at the formula bar, it's actually a formula. There is no number up there. Now the reason we use these cell references instead of typing in the numbers, because we can do 5 plus 2 in our head, is that if we change cell E3 to maybe 8, watch what happens to cell G3. It's no longer 7, it now turns into 10. So it will do the math for us if our numbers change. That way our math is always correct in our spreadsheet. So we always want to use cell references. We never want to just do the math in our head. So let's delete that for now and come back over here. So say, for example, we want to create a chart that will help us calculate the price of a meal with tip. So a good example of a tip is 20%. So normally our tips are 20%. You should be able to see that in our packet here. I'm right about there where I just highlighted. So if we wanted to calculate what a $20 meal would be with tip, the first thing we would do is equal sign. So we're going to put a formula in here so it will do the math for us. Then we want to take the price of the meal, which would be cell A2. And then we are going to multiply it. Multiplication is the star symbol, the asterisk. If you're curious what symbols to use, look over here on your OneNote. Those are the symbols that you can use to type in your formula. So I'm using the asterisk for multiplication. Let's pop back over here. So if we want to know the price of we want to know the tip, we would then multiply the bill by 20%, which would be 0.20 when we hit enter. So the tip is $4. We can do the same thing here. Equal sign, B3 times 0.2 equals, oops. Sometimes you might get those errors, which in those cases, you just need to look and see what's going on. See my cell B3 here? That is the wrong one. I needed A3, not B3. So let's go back and change that. A3. There we go, $5. So now it's doing that calculation for me. So if I wanted to calculate all of these using the same pattern, because you notice there's a pattern going on here, I can hover over this little plus sign, or not little plus sign, the little box that is in the bottom right corner, and drag that all the way down, and it will duplicate that formula for me over and over again, changing it to match the pattern. All right, let's pause there for a second. So before we go into the next section, I want to take a minute and make sure we're all on the same page when it comes to how to calculate your price of the meal when it includes tip. So when you're in a restaurant and you're ready to pay your tab and go home, what you do is you take the price of the meal, you multiply it by the tip, which in this case we're going to use 20% tip. And then you're going to add that back to the price of the meal. So for example, it would look something like this. We would do price of the meal times 0.2, because that's the decimal form of 20%. And then we would add whatever that equals to the price of the meal. So for example, if our meal is $20, we would multiply that by 0.2. 20 times 0.2 is equal to 4. So then we would add 4 to 20, because that's the price of the meal. So our bill would be $24. So this is our tip, and that's the price of the meal. $24 total is what you would leave. So we are going to create in Excel a calculator that will allow us to figure out the price of a meal with tip based on a certain tip percentage. So you should still have this chart here, you can clear anything out in column B that you have. And then in column C, write tip percentage, and we are going to make that 20% with the percent sign. So 20, you click over here, 20%. So now what we want to do over here is we want to take that formula that we just wrote out over in OneNote, and we're going to turn it into a formula in Excel. So we are going to use cell references so that we can copy the formula down, and that if we change the price of the meal, it will also change the total. So we start all formulas with an equal sign, and we want it to look at A2, it's that one right there, times 20%, which is 0.2. Now we needed parentheses, if you remember correctly, so we're going to put end parentheses there. I'm going to move my cursor, and as I go to use my arrows, you might get this pop up. So I'm going to click no, because it's just showing me an error message. Click OK, saying that something's not right here. So instead of using my arrow keys, I'm going to click up in the formula bar, and then I'm able to go put that parentheses in. So I got equal sign A2 times 0.2, because that's our 20% tip. That will give us the tip, and then we want to add it back to cell A2. Hit enter and we get $24, just like we got when we wrote it out. However, I did not use a cell reference here, I just used 0.2. So if we knew we were always going to be using the same percentage, that would be fine. We could hand type it in. But we want to use cell references in case we want to change the tip percentage later. So I'm going to backspace that, and I'm going to change it to C2. So now I have A2, which is the price of the meal, times C2, which is the tip percentage, plus A2, which is the price of the meal. I hit enter, I should get $24. Now, if we want to copy this down, try copying it down. Pull the formula box all the way down and see what happens. You're going to notice that it works for row 2. So you've got 20, 24. But it does not work for row 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7. They are all identical. And the reason is, as we copied these down, it changed A2 to A3, but it also changed C2 to C3. There are two ways you could go about fixing this. You could fill in 20% for all of these, but maybe we don't want to do that. Instead, we can use dollar signs to freeze certain aspects of our formula. So I'm going to delete everything in these cells down here, and then we're going to go back into cell B2, and we're going to use some dollar signs. We want to freeze this C2 because we always want it to be referencing this cell right here. We don't want it to reference any other cells as we copy it down. So to freeze it, we are going to put a dollar sign in before the C. When we put a dollar sign before the C, it's going to freeze the fact that we are looking at column C. Now to test and see if that's enough, we can copy this down again. You're going to see that it still isn't correct. And the reason is it's freezing column C, but it's not freezing the row. It's still saying C3. So because of that, I'm going to go back and delete again. And now we know we needed to freeze not only the row, but we needed to freeze the column. We're going to freeze everything. So we want two dollar signs, $C, $2. That means it'll freeze both the column and the row. We hit enter and then drag that formula box down. We should see that it changes all of them correctly. Now what we can do is if we want to change the tip percentage, maybe we want to be a bit more generous and do 25% tip, all of our prices here should change. If we want to be less generous and maybe do 15% tip, all of our prices should then again change just by changing this one cell. So whenever you are doing formulas and you need it to reference a specific cell or a specific row and you need something to freeze and not change, you can use the dollar sign as your freezer. All right, back over on your OneNote, we are going to keep skimming down to this next section here where it says data fill with series. So open up a new sheet, and I want you to type in some of this information. Not all of it. Don't go ahead and start typing all of it in yet. Just type in this information right here in this little second screenshot. When you're ready to go, it should look something like this. I typed week of homework in A1, and I'm going to merge some cells together by highlighting A1 through F1, going over to home. Under alignment, there's the option to merge and center. So we'll put all of those cells into one big cell. So we've got week of homework in one cell going from A1 covering all the way through F1. So what we are able to do is we're able to use Excel to sort of pick up on patterns. So it's going to recognize dates and it's going to recognize a few other things. So what we can do is if we click in 9 April, if we click that little plus sign that we use to drag formulas, we can drag it over and you're going to see that it's guessing 10 April, 11 April, 12 April, 13 April. It will fill those in for us. And then going down with periods, we can click and drag again, and it's going to guess second period, third period, fourth, all the way down through eighth. So instead of typing those out all by ourselves, we can use Excel to guess what we are doing, and it will do some of the typing for us. So you can see in your OneNote here, it does it with a handful of things, numbers, minutes, seconds. It'll pick up on patterns. If you're typing things in that have the same ending over and over again, it will often pick up on that for you, and you can use it to do a lot of the work. So the next thing that you're going to do, that's the end of that packet. You are going to go back in your OneNote under Excel. You should have Excel worksheet day 2. This is going to work just like the first one that you did. Here is your spreadsheet that you need to retype. It is called Bob's Paint Store. So put that into Excel, and then you're going to do these tasks to it. There's lots of different ones here. It does say at the very end down here, save it in your P drive. You do not need to save it in your P drive, but you should save it into your OneDrive for Business or OneDrive St. Francis. And don't forget to keep scrolling. You are going to see that there's a second one here called Temperature Spreadsheet. Again, you don't need to save it to your P drive, just save it to your OneDrive. And you can put both of these into the same document, just make 2 different sheets within the same Excel workbook. So down here at the bottom, you can have one being Bob's Paint Store and the other being the temperature conversion sheet. So work on those 2 spreadsheets. When you're all done, save it as an Excel document and then upload it to the correct spot on campus.